It was one of the most terrifying creatures to ever exist on planet Earth. While mainstream science will tell you that Megalodon, the much larger cousin of the great white shark, died out many millions of years ago, there's a strong body of evidence out there that there still may be a few of these lurking around. It's the stuff of nightmares. But what if I told you there's evidence right here in Florida that our ancient ancestors were taking matters into their own hands and hunting these creatures and built structures to do so? Stay tuned. You're going to definitely want to see this video. But of course, as always, I want to be diligent, and I want to say thank you to everyone who continues to join us here and be part of the conversation every day. Also, all of you over at Patreon, thank you guys so much. It is so humbling to see every morning new people showing up and taking part in the training. It's only $1 per month. It's even less if you sign up for an entire year. Fully gloves off and fully refundable as well. You can stick around for 90 days. If it's not for you, you get your $3 back. $1 for each of those 3 months. We can take the gloves off because of Vimeo. And that's really the key. It is currently, before I forget to say, 21 November, Monday, 2022. It is currently 18:15 hours. That is, of course, 6:15 p.m. in the evening. For those of you in the civilian world, it is currently 65.7 degrees. We had a high today of 78.1 and a low of 53.8 degrees. Currently, barometer 30.25 inches of mercury and holding steady. Now, without any further delay, there's a little place off the coast of Florida known as Bimini. It's kind of halfway between the Florida mainland and the Bahamas. Bimini is a sportsman's paradise. Boating, sailing, beaches, but it is known primarily for sport fishing. People come from all over the world to fish, and there are so many different types of game fish that you can catch there. It's not a very big place, and I just want to use Google Earth real quick to show you this. Now, the reason we're going to talk about this today is because there's a structure down there called the Bimini Road. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. It's been the subject of a lot of different studies. Well, I have a completely different theory about the Bimini Road. Now, real quick, here's Miami. Here's the Bahamas. If you find the largest island, North Bimini, and you come up here to the northwest coast, you will find it marked, actually. It'll say Bimini Road. It'll kind of look like, strangely enough, from this angle, almost like a compass. Very strange structure that they really didn't look into much until the late 60s. Some had said, well, it's a natural formation. Beach rock sometimes does this. When you get down in the water and you actually look at this structure, there's absolutely no way that can be the case. Now, 8,000 BC, sea levels were a great deal lower. This northern coast right here, what they call Bahama Island, you see this island doesn't exist anymore. But right up here, this is where the Bimini Road was, and that's key. That's absolutely key. That's something to remember for later. Now, this is what it looks like from average one-seater Cessna. You can barely make it out right here. This is what it looks like enhanced. Let me zoom out a little bit here. It's definitely a created structure. Now, many have said, oh, it could be a dry dock. It's some type of a seawall. Who created it when? There's been a lot of speculation. Now, I know this looks like it's not related. It's just a grocery cart, Maki. What the heck? What happens? You overload a grocery cart, and you're rolling along, and you've got a 100-pound grocery cart, and you've got another 250 pounds of groceries in it, and you're just pushing along, and it's no big deal, and you hit a little unseen rock on the ground. What happens? That entire huge 300-pound mess comes to a screeching halt, usually with a terrible noise accompanying. Now, how could such a little teeny tiny itty bitty rock stop something so big? Well, it just has to do with physics. And that when you're using leverage, meaning the cartwheels, to move this huge amount of weight, there are things that cannot get in the way of that leverage. Now, keep that in mind. The Bimini Road has a feature to it that you can't really see until you dive on it. Underneath all of these stones are other stones used to level the road. Now, some like, wait a minute, these look like they're just setting in the sand. That's what a lot of people show. They are. But you can kind of see around some of them that they have placed stones. Somebody created a level surface. And here you can see one of them right here. See how you can see the light from the ocean over to the right and then over to the left? They didn't just place the stones all in order in a row. They leveled it. Now you'd have to ask, why would they, what structure would need to be leveled so precisely? Here's another one of them. What kind of a structure? Why would you need, if it was, some have said it's a dry dock, and it looks kind of like a dry dock, like perhaps it might have been, but you wouldn't need the sides of the dry dock to be this precise. But if you were rolling something along it, or bringing something extremely heavy up or down it, you would absolutely need it to be leveled. Now, here's one of the neatest pictures I've seen in a long time. What they've done here is they've drained away the ocean. And this is what the Bimini Road looked like when it was above sea level, 8,000 BC. Now you can see how it slopes down, and they have lifted these rocks up. And there's areas where water can go in and out. What I truly think they were doing down here was, you could say, well, if they brought a ship in, this would be the place for the keel, and they would bring it in, and they would be able to set it down in a dry dock. Well, they would have to have some way of getting the water in, getting the water out, right? And they would have some way to keep the water from running in and out of those rocks. And there's no evidence that they had any way of sealing that up. So they would have just been slaved to the tides. Meaning if this was low tide, they could work on a ship that was setting in there, but once high tide came back in, they'd have to, wait until the next day. You see, this is an example of a modern dry dock. And that's why a lot of people, I think, make this mistake that that's what it might be. There's this story out there about Chinese fleet, 1400s, created this thing because of the weather. I don't think that's what they were doing, given the size of it. And this is the key. From here, all the way here on the lower left to the upper right, is 1/4 of a mile long. Why would you need 1/8 of a mile long dry dock? And here's the key, why would the rest of this area, all these stones, all widen out into some type of a road like this? They make a 90-degree turn right here, and then there's another set of stones right here. But these aren't sloping down toward the sea. It doesn't add up for a dry dock. I mean, they have ancient ones, and they had used all sorts of different ways of doing this. This is what I think this was. I think they honestly found what this thing ate. Because, once again, Florida is the home of Megalodon teeth. I believe over Venice Beach. There's a beach right around Venice, Florida. That is the worldwide capital. Now, here's where the Bimini Road is. We know that this creature frequented all over the coast of Florida. Here's the Perry Reese map from way back when. Remember the map that allegedly shows Antarctica? Well, when you zoom in on the Perry Reese map, this is Brazil right here in the center. If you go up here to the left, you see this big red island right here? Some have said that it's Cuba. It's not. Let's see if we can zoom in here. It's not oriented correctly for Cuba. And here's the funny thing about this. They show, I zoomed in a little too much, just to the upper right, this giant fish right here. And it shows what looks like some type of a support system. Let's see, I have a better picture of this. Hold on. This island, Bahama Island, that was around in 8000 BC, matches this Piri Reis map island perfectly. It literally could set right on top of it. So it's much, much older than what the Chinese would have been using. Here it is. These look like supports, and some said, well, those look like keel supports. That could be for a ship. Maybe they might have, but why would this all be in red? Why would this whole island all be in red? Well, what would happen if you had giant 85-foot fish being dragged out of the water and slaughtered seaside? You'd have red everywhere. Bimini Road investigation. Different theories on Bimini. The Atlantis theory, the Gavin Menzies theory about the China discovered the world, that it's natural. You see, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if, you see this guy got this overloaded cart here, big, heavy thing? If he hits that little rock that's right here. Let's see, let me angle this down here. What's going to happen? It's going to come to a screeching halt. This area here was where they brought the fish in. Now, they may not have landed them. They may have just hooked them. And they brought them in. And they pulled them in to this channel. And once they brought them into this channel, they would have needed all this extra space to get the ship and the crew safely away. And once they bring a giant fish like that into shallow water, as long as they have it hooked, they don't have to land it. They just got to wait for the tide to go out. And once the tide goes out, I don't care how big the shark is, it's going to be stranded. Then they could go out at their leisure and they could, just like they do with whales. And then everything that they got from the fish, they brought up here. And I think that's probably why you find a huge amount of Megalodon teeth inland in Florida. They said, well, the reason is there was Megalodon and Florida was completely underwater, and that's why. I don't think that's the case. I think the natives that were living here at this time had the ability to grab Megalodon and other large sharks, drag them into here, drag them into the shallows with their ships, whether it was 2 ships or 3 ships or 4 ships, and they wouldn't try to land them. They would just bring them in, and they would then just wait, get them in shallow enough water, tie them off, exhaust them, and then when the water went out, the water drained out because of the tide, they could go out and finish them off. And they had all these teeth they could use for saws, or they could use for arrows or necklaces or anything else. And that's why you see the huge proliferation, of teeth, shark's teeth, all over Florida. And there are. I mean, you can look this up. Florida is the capital of not just shark's teeth, Megalodon teeth. That structure would be perfect. It would be ideal. If you had, think about it. If you had a large fish, so big you had no chance of landing it, what would be but you wanted to get the fish, bring it in, and what would you do if you couldn't get into the boat? You'd take the boat to shore, wouldn't you? Well, what if it was a huge fish, a huge fish? And here's the smoking gun. Not too far away from this is this very strange, and this is in Bimini too, formation. That it's basically just a pile of rocks that over a long period of time have built up. I wonder if this was a waste dump. And it's literally in the shape of a shark, where they just were being artistic, or for whatever reason, they created this giant place to dump all of the different waste from, or unusable bone or whatever, from the sharks over thousands and thousands of years. You see, it doesn't really make sense to me for a dry dock, because these sides right here wouldn't have to be perfectly level. Some are saying, well, why do you think they have to be level? Because sometimes they had to roll the fish up. They have this huge body, this huge heavy carcass. And sometimes they had to bring it up and they had to roll that stuff up. And if you're rolling very heavy things, in which, believe me, at that time, if you're rolling things back and forth, up and down, you don't want any kind of a hiccup. That's why they had to level all this, because what they were bringing in was hugely heavy. They could have had, how many have seen the little not electric, but they were little diesel locomotives in the Panama Canal they used to pull? They had rails that were set along the side of the Panama Canal, and there were these little diesel engines, and they would hook them up to the giant ships coming through the canal, and they would pull them through the canal. They were clearly pulling something very, very heavy out of the ocean. Now, if it was a ship, the ships here would have had to have been 20 times bigger than what were known to be built at that time. Because, like I said, this is, just from where this opening is right here to the end, this is 1/8 of a mile. It's 1/8 of a mile. I mean, you could pull just in this section right here, you could pull an aircraft carrier in. An aircraft carrier, I'm not sure the exact length of an aircraft carrier, but I don't think an aircraft carrier is 1/4 of a mile long. I really don't. I don't think it's 1/4 of a mile long. Modern Gerald Ford. Somebody can probably look that up for me. See how long the Gerald Ford is, or how long the Ronald Reagan is. But I don't think they're 1/4 mile long. There's no way. And that's how long this is up here too. See, they might have, as the tide came in, this might have been one level of tide. This might have been another level up here for other different larger fish. See, for them, fishing wasn't about sport. It was about easy. And fish wasn't just meat. It was all of the bones and everything else they could use. So this looks like some type of a fishing construction type thing. And given the size of it and the scope of it, and the fact that they leveled those platforms, they were dealing with very, very heavy loads. And other than whales, the only other creature that would be that heavy that was common to this area at that time would be Megalodon. So I guess I will leave it there and let you guys make up your own mind about it. But ancient man saw the world very differently than we do. We have a lot of luxuries that they didn't. And a creature like this, if it took down crews or it took down boats, I mean, that was literally messing with people's... It's still messing with people's lives if somebody gets eaten by a shark. But for them, those fishing boats meant the entire village's life. And if they lost an entire crew or an entire boat to a creature like this, you can bet it would be job number one, get rid of this creature. And besides, something this size could feed a village for a year. So, anyway, God bless. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. What do you think? I mean, especially with these images. I mean, this is pretty stunning to me, that mainstream science thinks this is natural. And that's truthfully the case. Most mainstream science will say, well, it's really just beach rock and it's fractured. It's just kind of it did it in a weird shape. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, thank you very much for hanging out. I appreciate it. Thank you for all of you guys over Patreon for your patience. I know I was going to have a video up. It's already freaking Monday. The weeks are just going by way too fast, but I definitely have one I am almost done with. And Lord willing, next 24 to 48, we will have that up for you. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.